Welcome back to How We Love. I am Robin Lane, psychologist and host. My guest today is Betsy Knapp. Betsy is a true role model. She has overcome overwhelming stress. Her journey from personal upheaval to success in both love and business makes her someone to emulate. She teaches us what can be accomplished when resilience, courage, and heart act in concert. Welcome, Betsy. It's a pleasure to have you here as our guest.
Yes, a pleasure for me also. Thank you for asking me
Betsy, we,
to be part of you,
let's
your
start with your
production.
backstory. I'm sorry? Well, let's start with your backstory because before we get to where you are now in your life, which is a pretty wonderful place, um, let's start with your first marriage. And how old were you when you met your husband?
About, I was about 17, 18 years old when I met my first husband.
But he was
Well,
your first love.
he was my first love, yes. We
Yeah.
were like, except I can't say he was like a high school sweetheart. He went to another school and so did I. We just met socially amongst the crowd that we all hung out with. That's how I met him at a
And
park.
how quickly did it take for you to feel this is the guy I want to spend my life with?
It did take some times because I never really had a steady boyfriend.
And what did your parents think of him?
Well, at the beginning they liked him, but as the relationship grew, there were a lot of things my parents did not like about him.
And was
Uh,
that before you got married?
yes.
What did they see that you didn't?
Well, I think coming from number one, coming from a Jewish background, he wasn't Jewish. I lived in a neighborhood, I want to say, which was probably predominantly Jewish. My mother was one of 10. She was seven sisters and three brothers. And basically, nobody really got married and went out with anybody who wasn't Jewish. Everybody, all my cousins, basically, and my aunts and uncles, everybody married somebody who was Jewish.
Ah, I see. So that was the reason. So,
That was
but
the
you,
beginning. Yes.
so you married
Mhm.
him in spite of the family saying they weren't happy about it
I really didn't take that into consideration. I heard my mother, but I was marrying Jim for other reasons.
because you were so in love.
I was I was in love, so in love when I think about a note, but he had some characteristics that I actually admired, and I wanted to learn from him.
And what were they?
Uh, First of all, I loved his brain, his mind. I didn't really pay attention much in school. We didn't really have any money to do any kind of activities. I love the fact that he read a lot. My parents really never read. I never really read. I loved his brain actually. That was the most engaging thing, and I think I fell in love with his mind. He came second. What he looked like.
What did he look like, by the way?
Well, as people say, well, movie star qualities was the expression.
So he was very handsome too.
Yes, movie star qualities.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah. So it
yes.
wasn't just his brain.
No, but I dismissed that. I loved his
No, come on,
lifestyle.
Betsy. It's not possible to dismiss a handsome man.
It was, but like I said, people that liked me or I went out on a few dates. I always thought the person I was with was handsome, so it was never really anything I was really that was that important to me. I just
So,
gravitated towards, let's say, handsome men.
and so you got married. And did your
But I
family,
eloped. But I
you
eloped in some.
eloped, you eloped.
Yes, yes. We were
Wow.
dating 5 years already.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Yeah. So you eloped because your family was so against it. And
and so
what was,
was his family. So was his family. I
yeah.
mean, yes, basically everyone's
And
against
did you
it.
have a career or job at that time?
Um, I think I put my I was a lab technician for a while, and then I put myself through to a community college because sadly, my mother, when I said to my mother about going to college, my mother had saying to me that she didn't think that I was college material,
Ooh,
meaning meaning I have a pretty face, and she always thought I was a little bit of a floozy, and maybe if you wanted to, the best thing she was going to say, she sent me to nursing school in hope that I would marry a doctor, a typical Jewish mother, but it didn't
yes.
turn out that way.
Yes, that's the Jewish dream. So,
That's the
so you
Jewish dream.
did you finish nursing school when you got
I
married?
actually finished nursing school, uh, a 1 year nursing school in the old New York hospital. It was a practical nurse certificate that I got, and then I wanted to go on further because I think my graduation class was the last one in hospitals. You know, nursing schools used to be in the hospitals in the city. You didn't have to go to college for that. And then I started to go to a Kingsborough Community College in the late afternoons, you know, after a day's work. And that
So,
took me 5 years to graduate a 2 year college. For my mother did not want to pay for me, and she thought this is a complete waste of time. So it took me
so
5 years to get out of a
you
2 year school.
so you got married
Yes.
right before you finished school or after you finished school?
Uh, what my last year in school, I got married, and I want to say got married, and almost before I was already pregnant with my daughter Nicole. So I never went to the graduation.
So you were already pregnant
Yes.
and you were 23 at that time,
Yes.
23, 24?
20, about 23, 24, yes.
Uh-huh. And so what was life like when you had a baby and a new husband?
Uh, life was good. Again, you know, he came from a wealthy family. I came from
Oh, you didn't mention that.
he came from a wealthy family. I came from a, we want to say, middle class family, but we lived in an apartment, the Far Rockaways. It's a 3 bedroom apartment. I shared with my sister, my older sister shared with my brother, so we were always crammed. But I had family issues, so it wasn't like I had a great life living in Far Rockaway. I had my own personal histories with my mother and my father's behaviors. Yes, there was a lot of that. Hmm.
So now you're married, and where are you living?
I lived in Forest Hills Gardens for the first year, and then I moved to Greenwich.
Well, for people who don't know, those are both beautiful areas.
Hmm. Yes,
So
I'm
your
in
life,
Greenwich
your,
over
your
50.
life changed beautifully.
Yes, but you know, yes, it did change, but sadly, at the end,
Well, let's
it
not
was
get to the end.
at the end.
Let's
I don't
get
know if
it.
we'll get to the end today, but yes, it did not
Let's,
change. Yes, I had a lovely, I had a good first 2 or 3 years, no more than three.
but
And that's
you
marriage.
had 3 children,
4 children. I have
four,
four.
4 children.
I have 4 girls.
So if the marriage was, you're saying that you started noticing problems after the third year?
Um, I noticed problems, not, I would say after the second year, the way he was acting.
What did you see? What did you
Not
sense?
coming home. He was involved in his father's business. They were Wall Street brokers, and things weren't going good there. It's just a way to just sum it up. I mean, it's a story in itself. He lost everything. It's one of those typical Wall Street stories that you hear,
What do you mean?
like like a Bernie Madoff type story. A
What do you,
little.
can you be a little specific?
Well, my father-in-law controlled everything, kept a lot of secrets from his. He had Jim had a brother Tony, kept secrets, and was doing a lot of basically things that were not up and up, and
You mean
I'm
corrupt?
up and up and corrupt. Yes,
Hmm.
yes, and that led to, although Jim would always deny it, but that led to Jim being unfaithful. Jim becoming somebody I didn't recognize anymore.
Your husband became unfaithful within 2 years of marriage?
Yes, yes.
That's
Yeah,
unusual.
yes. Well, I don't know if it's unusual, but I lived
That early on,
when I
it's unusual.
started, like I said, I felt that I didn't have enough to go on my own. He gave me a very nice lifestyle. I never did turn the cheek because I always knew. I confronted him on many occasions.
How
He
did
had
you find out that he was cheating?
Oh, well, I think he would love to leave traps for me. Of course, the easy credit card slip. When we
Uh-huh.
go home, and let's say I would hang up the clothes the next morning, he would forget maybe the receipt was in his pocket. But I felt that this was all intentional. He wanted me to know.
What was that like for you, Betsy?
Well, I was totally devastated because I lived with a guy who lied to me every day. So I had to pretend that when he told me it was no, that I was exaggerating. I had to just accept it. He
Wow.
wasn't, yeah. Plus, he's Italian, and he was Italian, and I lived in fear of him. Actually, my love turned into a fear.
What do you mean fear of him? You thought he would hurt you physically?
No, I felt that if I was going to say anything, he would never hit me physically, but he had a temper. He would, let's say, bang things, throw things. I overheard him with threatening, let's say, somebody who worked for him. He turned into somebody I did not know.
I want to
Okay.
understand something. So you're telling me this about this man who you were fearful of, and yet you went on and had more children with him. Why was that?
Well, because he played, I guess the only way to say is that he played me. He knew how to warm my heart. He knew the few little things that I needed, and he gave it.
Give me an example.
Um, I was able, when I came to Greenwich, I had a very nice house, not a big house, but I had some creature comforts. I always had somebody to help me with the kids for a while there. I was young and impressionable. I had a fancy car. So everything that has happened to me, even in that period, I look back and understand why I did what I did. I'm never angry of the choices I made.
What, you wouldn't have your daughters?
My daughters and my learning experience was another thing. And
Yeah.
then actually, through all that time, I knew I needed help. I knew I couldn't get help because Jim would never, let's say, give me money to see a psychiatrist. So that's when it began that I had to really start to work on myself and see what I was made of.
But now we're moving to what years? Like the eighth year? How many years
I
were you
would say
married?
the end of Jim and I was 1988. We got married. That was a total end of Jim. I think I got married. I got married to Jim in like 1970. And I was finally able to get divorced Jim, I think, in 1988. But, Jim is a
So
whole
it was
different story.
18 years. And in those
Yes, but
18
for
years,
3 of those years, we definitely spent apart.
okay, so there was 15 years that you lived
Yes,
together and you had 4 children. And there's something that you haven't talked about in any depth, which is that he wound up going to jail, correct?
that's correct.
Or could you tell us that story?
It's, I could tell the story, but it's a story between him and his father, actually. His father set him up. His father made Jim steal stocks. And
Steal, he made him steal stocks. How do you steal
Yes, they
stocks?
were brokerage. It's pieces of paper, certificates, they called them in those days.
So in other words, by saying you steal stocks, you
Meaning
put
he shouldn't
your
have, yeah, he shouldn't have done that at the end when they were having trouble. His father told him, we're going to take these stocks and we're going to cash it in. It wasn't their stocks to cash in.
oh
Real
my
simple.
God.
Yeah,
So
not really. No,
it was other people. So they
that's
robbed.
correct. I mean, this is a story that people know from not only my husband, but you've heard these stories before.
Well, I haven't.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
tell me.
No, it's not that it's painful, but it's so convoluted that when it got to that point, this is a problem that Jim had for Jim and his family and his mother and father. That whole nucleus was never addressed.
You
Everybody
mean
was
you
about
mean
the father.
they were all corrupt?
No, the father was corrupt. The father was violent to his mother, and in turn, there was some violence between the two brothers. It was an unhealthy, dynamics. But when you say, "Well, it took me so long," well, how do you learn that unless you live through it? No one's going to teach you that. You have to live it.
Well, I would imagine that.
A novel's not going to tell you how to act, or a book. You don't have that answer there. That's an
But
experience I had to have.
but I would imagine that during the time when he was started to steal stocks, his behavior around the house
It's not that he
changed.
was stealing stocks. He was, sometimes he was, I don't really know because I wasn't that involved. He would, people say he rigged the stock market. He made some poor choices. So I don't know. Jim had his own demons. I couldn't focus on Jim. At the end, when I saw things were changing, I knew that something was going to explode. So I had to start to focus on myself. I
And
just,
the reason you couldn't focus because you had four kids.
that's right.
Right. So yeah. So, but when you felt something was going to explode, what was that like? And well,
When it did explode,
hmm
um, what was that like? That was like, I'm glad it did, because this guy was so powerful that if it meant my husband going to jail, to me, that was my card for freedom. I never cried. When I had to
what?
turn him over, I never cried,
Why was that?
because he knew how to manipulate people, because of he's just a charming guy, smart. People loved him everywhere you went. I hardly even went out with the guy because I couldn't stand him in a social setting, how he acted. Very bravado, you know, which was all a bunch of lies.
Yeah, you mean he was always busy charming other people?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So how did you find out that he was? I mean, your husband's going to jail. What is that like?
It's a buildup. It doesn't happen overnight. On and he had when this happened, this is an old story of Wall Street. A lot of people who are still in Wall Street knew the story. Uh, I never thought, I was praying that he would get locked up. I was praying they put this guy away, because he could get his ultimatum. If even when I felt that I did want to leave, I was able to leave by myself.
But financially, how are you going to manage?
I didn't manage. That's what I couldn't manage, but I never even got that option. It wasn't even the money. He wouldn't let me take the kids. He was so powerful. I stayed. There were no such
Oh,
things as, shelters, or, you go to some place, you'll get some sort of subsidy. I, my mother sometimes gave me money. I didn't want to keep telling my mother. My mother lived up here when she was alive, not too far from me. I had to take it on my own. At that time, every decision I made was planning for what's going to come.
so
Would
when he
be
went,
locked up.
so
Huh?
Betsy, when he went to jail, what were you? How financially were you managing? What did you do?
I had to sell whatever I had. I had some beautiful jewelry I sold, uh, some paintings I sold, and
But you had four children. I mean, that wouldn't
I
be enough.
rented every room in my house.
I'm
I
sorry. Say that again.
rented rooms in my house.
You rented rooms in your house?
I moved myself and my girls down to the basement of the house I'm presently living in.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's rooms for rent, but I couldn't say it because I live in a private area. So I wasn't able to say that.
Oh my God. You went from one extreme to another extreme.
The most important thing is because I wanted to hold on to the house. I found out even then that my house, Jim never really paid the mortgages, and my house, when I had to surrender Jim, the next day, a big, I think it was a deputy sheriff that came and put a poster on my tree, but they don't do those anymore. My house was being foreclosed in the next 3 months. Uh huh.
And so you took in boarders, essentially.
Yes, yes, rooms for rent on a weekly basis.
And how did that go?
Very well.
What do you mean?
I rented every room. It happened to be the summertime. It was in May. So I live in Greenwich, where I live. I'm walking distance to the train, and I'm near the water and the beaches. And people love to come out and spend their weekends in Greenwich or the summers. It worked out well. I rented every room on a weekly basis.
By the way, did people in the community know what was going on? I mean, how did people
I
treat
had
you?
a neighbor who knew. The one blessing in disguise. I lived in on a dead end street, so there were only four houses. One neighbor knew. And the other neighbors really didn't know because that was their second home, and they lived in New York City. So, but they didn't really care. I'm not to this day. I don't even know my neighbors, but it was okay. It was okay.
Well, I mean, you were a very busy woman. You had four children. It must have been an overwhelming time. And you've changed your house into a boarding
So
house.
during that time, I went to work. I immediately surrendered gym. I think on a Monday evening. By Tuesday morning, I was already working a job. There was times when I was working 5 jobs in a week.
What do you mean?
That's me. What?
What do you mean 5 jobs in a week?
Well, one, I never those times. I think the job market was sort of down. I think those are like the '70s, late '70s. Stock market wasn't a lot of opportunities there, so I took a lot of part-time work. But it did formulate to about 40 hours. I went back to I worked for I worked for a lawyer in town. I worked in a psychiatric unit on the weekends. I worked taking care of private duty cases also during the week. I was a rep for Christian Dior legwear, and I sold cosmetics in Bloomingdale's for Estee Lauder, and that was a week's work.
Oh my God.
Yes.
How did you keep it all straight? Oh my God.
Thank God I
And
was young.
hold on. And on top of which, you're also renting rooms out in your house. So you have to take care of the people who are in your house.
No, there were certain rules that I had about when they said taken care of. So they can leave whenever they wanted, and basically, it was my house. My kitchen is central location. They were allowed to use my kitchen at certain hours. I didn't care, but when my kids came home, of course, we had the priority, and that was it. No parties. Could they have anybody over? No girlfriend or boyfriend, and I never rented to any couples.
Why was that?
Because I didn't want anybody, I just didn't want it in the house. I didn't want to expose my girls to any of that.
Oh, you mean sex?
No. My oldest girl at that time, Nicole, was only, I think Nicole was maybe in junior high school, going into high school. Hmm.
And how did they take this? Their dad being in jail.
Actually, that's what everybody, actually, one must meet all my girls because my girls are probably, if you think I'm strong, they're just as strong as me. My girls knew what I had to do. I gave them some alternatives. The most important thing that I had said to them, that they wanted to stay in Greenwich and they wanted to stay in the house. I told them I would have to do certain things. We would have to live in the basement. And I also said, if you do one thing, if you get into any trouble, I will not be there to bail you out. And do not embarrass me any more than I have been. And that was it. And I explained the story, and it was in the headlines. It was on television. In the local New York Times did interviews. Actually, famous people called me to write a book. Alan Dershowitz called me. They wanted to do a study on me and Jim or write a book about it. I said no. Everything was no. Everything was no. And my line to my girls was this: don't be mad at Dad. Dad has all to do to take care of himself. And that was it. And not one of my girls cried after that.
Wow.
And to this day, I think he's alive. I don't know, obviously. And he never reached out to the girls. He lives in
He
New Jersey.
never reached out to his
Never
daughters?
reached out. No.
That's shocking. Of all the wow. Wow.
Shocking. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you I mean, I can barely grasp, frankly, all that you had to do. It just seems overwhelming to me. I don't know that I could have done it. I really don't. But then your life moved on. You rented to somebody who is now your husband. Could you tell us that story?
Well, the cute story was, the rooms were being rented, and I told you many jobs that I had had. So one day, my daughter wanted to go to visit her friends, Denise, and we drove. I drove her. I was working a 3 to 11 shift in a nursing home here in Greenwich. I said, "But Felice, who's going to take you home?" And she said, "You see that guy over there, Mom? That's Denise's mother's fiance." So this guy that she made me look at, the cute story was he had long hair, he wore a beard, a mustache, dungarees, sneakers, everything that to me is against what I think of as a guy. Because my first husband, like I said, he was like movie star quality. He was wearing Gucci loafers every day. He was wearing Brooks Brothers shirts, cashmere, everything. So I said to Felice, and I looked at my daughter, Felice, I said, "Oh my God." I said, "Felice, don't ever bring anything like that home to me." And we had a good laugh. We had a fantastic laugh. She goes, "Why, Mom?" I said, "If nothing else, the sneakers. I don't want to wear sneakers." She goes, "You're right." And I said, "The glasses, he must be blind as a bat, And beard? How could you kiss anybody with a beard?" She goes, "You're right, you're right." No sooner no sooner when 2 weeks passed and I put an ad in the local newspaper, rooms for rent. So it was from, if you came on a Monday, you left on you had to pay every Monday, whatever day of the week it was. So I had rented all the rooms, and then it was a Sunday evening, and he comes to the door. Bob comes to the door, and I'm telling you, during that time, my father, it's another story, passed away. So I was wearing, that black ribbon that the Jewish people wear when they put the body in the grave. So when I entered the door, and he said, "Oh, I know you," he goes to me. So I said, "You know me?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I know about this house. This house is being foreclosed." I said, "So big deal, the house is being foreclosed." He goes, "And I know the original owner." So I said, "Oh," and he goes, "Yeah." So he goes, "Well, the original owner says that you're in deep trouble." I said, "Listen, buddy, do you want the room? He goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Do you or don't you want the room?" And he goes, "You're so mean to me." I said, "Do you want the room?" He goes, "Yes." So I said to him, he goes, "Well, how much is the room?" So in the newspaper, it said 100 to 125. I said, "For you, it's 150. I'm telling you, I knew I was going to marry him. It's like Cupid hit me
Why?
back in my shoulder. I still have the pain. And I said, and tears were rolling down my eyes. And he said to me, "Oh, I know, Mrs. Masiello, while you're crying." I said, "Hey, buddy, you have no drift while I'm crying, you know,
Why were you crying?
because I knew I was going to marry this guy. I didn't want him.
What
He
do
was,
you mean?
he
Wait a
was the
minute, wait a
absolute
minute, wait a minute,
opposite.
wait a minute. What do you mean you knew you were going to marry this guy?
I
First of all,
knew this
wasn't he
was the,
engaged Betsy, let me finish. Did you not tell me that he was engaged to someone else?
yes, he was it. Obviously, he said that day they broke off the engagement.
Well, what was it about him? You found you didn't like the way he dressed. You couldn't stand his beard. What was it about him that made you feel that you were going to marry this guy in an instant?
Because he almost came camouflaged. That he really, also, he didn't know who he was. There was something about the guy. I don't know what it was, but I just knew it. I said, "Boy, if he ever shaved and got regular contacts in his eyes, he's a good looking guy behind all this." But it's a very long story. But anyway,
Well, please tell me the story
I
because
can't I can't
I
tell you.
know, I had no idea that you knew the minute he came over that you were going
Yes,
to marry him.
crying. He thought I was crying because what happened to Jim. That Jim was in the newspaper, and my house was being foreclosed, and my father just died. There were legitimate reasons why he might have thought I was crying. But none of them was that reason.
What was
I was
it?
trying because I was going to marry this guy, and this was totally the opposite thing that I would ever look at.
Betsy, was it a warmth that came to him? What was the feeling that you had?
I don't know. There was just something about he was so directed. He knew, he was very thorough. I needed someone he's a thorough guy. He knew what he wanted. He says, I'm going to stay here. He said, what happens if I leave? He goes, will you give me my money back if I stay 4 days? I said, no, I don't give anybody's money back. You have a full week here. Whether you stay here or not, you have that room for a week.
I still don't understand what connection.
I don't know what that part was.
You don't know. You
don't know
yourself
what the
don't know
connection
what
was.
you don't know what the connection was that you felt.
Not really, but no, I don't know what it was. Was I madly in love at that moment? Absolutely no. No. But also, he's younger than I am. I wasn't interested. I knew that I think Felicia told me that they're going to get married, and I think he wants to have children with Denise's mother. And with me, it was like, no way, buddy. I'm done. No more for me.
So how did it proceed?
Well, so then he did rent the room for, a couple of weeks. And one day he said to my daughter, Nicole and Felice, oh, gee, mom, that guy really wants you to be nice to him. I said, well, I don't know. So then, and they said that he likes you, Mom. I said, well, so I said, I'll see Felice. So then he said to Nicole one day, my oldest girl, he goes, what's going to make your mother be nice to me? She goes, well, first of all, you can't wear sneakers in front of my mom. Got to put on regular shoes. She can't stand people with a beard and a mustache. You got to cut that and shave it. You got to get a haircut. And you got to wear contacts because you have really bad eyes. So Nicole said, if you want, I will take you, pick me up at Greenwich High School, get out about 2:30, we'll go down Greenwich Avenue, and we'll do a makeover.
Is that what happened?
And he did a makeover.
Oh, my God. And so they did the makeover. And what happened when he came back?
They did the makeover, but then also he's very handy, Bob. And my house, when Jim had left, I was doing some construction downstairs in one of my rooms, but everything was put on hold because all my money was frozen. And he said to me, he goes, oh, I'm in construction. And he goes, I could fix a couple of things in that room for you. I said, oh, you can. And I wasn't really nice. I said, well, what does that mean? I said, I have no money. I'm not going to pay you anything. I do not take it off the rent either. So he goes, no. He goes, I'm one thing. He goes, I would love for you to make me a breakfast. I understand you're a fabulous cook. I said, that's all you want me to do? He goes, yeah. I said, I only have Saturday from the hours of 8 to 2 o'clock because I'm working 3 to 11. And I said, we'll meet here Saturday in the kitchen. So he goes down to show him the project. And I think it was less than 5 minutes. And he goes, I'm done. And I said, he's done with putting the doors up already? I said, I didn't even put the flame on the fried potatoes, So I finally get there. I said, well, I'm done. And then I said to myself, oh, then he comes up, he goes, well, I said, like, what else? And he says, all these other little things, Betsy. And then I said to myself, I better reconsider this guy. Then I started to be a little bit nicer. A lot of things that were left around the house that needed to be done, I knew that Bob could do it, and he did do it. Yeah, he helped me out. So we became friends.
And when did it transfer from friends to lovers?
Well, he got himself, like I said, physically, he got himself together. And we had a couple of ups and downs. He says, please, let's go out. And we started a date. And
was he still living in the house at that time?
Living in the house. And he just looked, Bob's looks. And just one night, it was like, whoa, look what he looks like there, So I think, maybe it was about 6 months already. And then he asked me out, and then we had a great night. I came home. I slept with him in my old master bedroom. And he said to me, I'm in love with you, Betsy. I said, just calm yourself down. You're not in love with me. Yeah. I said, but what you really have to do is you have to move downstairs in the basement with me so we can make some more money and rent your room out. He said, "You're kidding me." I said, "No, I'm not kidding you."
So
Uh-huh.
he, wait a minute. So in that basement was your four daughters
Hmm.
and Bob?
And me. I have a full, I have a
Was
basement,
that must have
3
been
rooms
some big
downstairs.
basement.
I have 3 rooms. They're different now, but I have 3 rooms downstairs. Yeah. 2 girls in each room and me in the big room.
And Bob in the room with you?
Yeah. And the crib, because Alexis was still in the crib at that
Oh
time.
my God. I don't know how you did all that, Betsy. I really don't. And were you at that time, were you working 5 jobs?
Yes. So was Bob. Bob had a full-time job in the city. And in the evening, sometimes he got home like 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and he went on and did a lot of side work, side jobs. Uh-huh.
My God. And so when did you two decide this is going to be forever?
That took many years. That took at least a year or 2 years. There's too much that was happening during that time. We were trying to save the house, how to save the house, but we couldn't. My house was being foreclosed, so all the money that I had from the renters, I paid into a trustee. I filed personal bankruptcy. We had to have a court hearing because the bank was going to take the house. So I tried to do good by putting the money in escrow, and a lawyer took my case in Bridgeport, and all that money we were saving to pay off the mortgage, but it was a little bit of a dent, and Bob didn't have the credentials to get a mortgage for the house.
So
At
what
that time,
happened?
my house was only worth. Uh, Everybody wanted my house. My house was worth 250,000, but I couldn't sell the house for cash because I didn't know how many liens were on my house. I had many liens, so I was afraid if I took the cash for 250, might wind up owing more money. So I never took that.
How were you able to save your house?
Well, through many different stories back and forth. It's too much because we'll be here till tomorrow morning, so I have to cut some of the stuff out. Uh, when I had heard that Bob was on the phone with his friend and said that he loved living in Greenwich, and he said he had $10,000 and to invest, and he doesn't know what he's going to do with the money. I overheard him on the phone. He got off the phone. I said, I have a proposition for you. I need you to go to the Bridgeport housing court with me and tell the court that you are going to you're interested in buying my house, but right now if we do not make the mortgages good, you have money to show that you could take it from your mortgage, Bob, your money. So he goes, so what do I get in turn as a result of that? I said, if and when we can refinance the house, you will be the owner of my house and you will get any money that you put in. You will be my partner because I'll never be able to get a mortgage, but you will be able to. I had made it up, by the way. And then I think it was 1988, it became when they had the mortgages, you didn't have to verify how much you made. Remember that time at all?
No,
Well,
no,
there's
I'm not aware of any of that.
the time in the 80s that the government said on you didn't have to report. You just had to report that you had a job and made X amount of money a month. They were giving mortgages out. I called Bob at work. I said, I heard on the radio, I want you to apply to, I think it was Chemical Bank, see if you can get a mortgage on the house, because now the real estate in Greenwich was a real estate boom. Everyone wanted to live in Greenwich. So I had 200 and let's say $38,000 lien on my house. My house got reassessed when the housing market went up for over 532,000. So we had equity in the house, and Bob applied for a mortgage and got it.
And now, where are you when?
So we were able to go to the court, and we were going to pay the mortgage off, pay all the liens off, and then the house is going to belong to Bob. So I went to the courthouse. They said, okay, Mrs. Masiello, you're in bankruptcy, but did you have to come up with a plan? I said, I got the plan today. And the lawyer said, Mrs. Masiello is going to sell the house to Robert Knapp, and he already has the money in escrow. He got a mortgage, Bob, and we're here to pay off all the creditors.
And that's what happened.
And the bank went crazy. The lawyers went crazy for the bank because now they know they wanted that other $250,000. They wanted to take my house over. But in the state of Connecticut, if you had girls that was a family certain age, they couldn't do that. So Bob bought the house. That was one chapter that ended.
And when did you and Bob get married?
I think it was 2 years after that.
And then you started a new business together.
Yeah. Yes. I actually think we should leave this for another day, my business, because I think this is so much to absorb.
Okay. All right. But one thing I
Yes.
want everyone to know is that you and Bob now, you're happily married and you are in a very successful business in
Yes.
Greenwich.
That's
All right,
correct.
Betsy, thank you so much. You really are exactly what I said, a true role model.
Yeah. Goodbye. I love you.
Bye, darling.